All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the AI Rebels podcast. We are here today with Nikolai. Nikolai has a long history in machine learning and AI. Has worked at a lot of different places. He started out at Google around 2005, I believe you said, right?
Yeah.
And then he worked his way through Twitter and NVIDIA. Along the way, he's worked for a couple a couple startups and a couple hedge funds as well. More recently, he has been working on a product called Deepnewz that is a news aggregator pipeline that is very cool to use. We'll talk more about that. Just to start off, Nikolai, what was the kind of genesis of your interest in machine learning?
Sure. I guess really, building games. So even as a kid, as a pretty young child, I was always trying to build things to play games. And obviously I was obsessed with chess. I was a chess player. Maybe a little bit after I started coding, but around the same time. And I was playing games like Civilization and Warcraft, and I was always fascinated by the AI, which wasn't really AI. No one called it then, and it was probably like an if-then thing. I guess the way the video games worked back then, maybe they still do now, is basically the computer gives itself full knowledge of the board, right? These are all fog of war games, and then it just insists on playing badly. So it's a really weird strategy where in Civ, your opponents know what you're doing, but then they just play badly against it as opposed to like optimally, which is always kind of lame. But anyway, I mean, I started coding things like that, like, you invent games or simulate games, and you build some things, usually sort of if-then functions, later on sort of like a little bit of local simulation. So really kind of from the application side, not from the theory side, not from the implementation side, really. I mean, I don't think it was until I was in college that I learned, how much of a difference it makes, if you run your search incredibly optimally in C with like bit shifts and things like that, as opposed to running it inefficiently, in Java where you're like destroying a whole board, right? You can imagine you're playing something like a large board Connect 4 or something like that. Representing the game state, like how you represent the game state efficiently actually makes the biggest difference in your sort of brute force search, which is definitely something I then put into some of my poker models. So I guess you could say really through games. But then I was I was a math major for various reasons and was doing like computer science theory. I was doing cryptography actually in grad school. And then I hated grad school. I took one job interview. I went to Google. They assigned me to the search team in New York, which was incredibly fortunate. Apparently, me and my teammate were like the last young people they ever put on search. Well, just because it's hard to make the improvements in the search, which people found discouraging. But and it was hard and it was discouraging, but it was an amazing experience. I guess Amit Singhal, who ran Google Search at the time, sort of the grand poobah, as we like to say, he was actually like sort of known to be anti-machine learning in many ways. You can sort of look him up, but he's sort of known for that. So instead, we had this sort of 4 or 5 levels of debugging level where you can just sort of add a special debug flag if you're logged into Google, and you can understand why result A ranks ahead of result B. There's a lot of human logic in there. A lot of it still came from the information retrieval, which was sort of a pretty important field of computer science then that Google came out of, and then Google killed that whole field. No one really does that anymore. Even though now search is back with vector search, that's great. But anyway, we were doing machine learning, but a lot of it had to be, hey, we can use this function, to get this stuff that then plugs into like Amit's beautiful debug. So an incredibly applied background. I think, I took one machine learning class in college where, again, I learned from a teammate that implementing things in C is a lot faster than implementing things in Java, which I knew, but like really what a difference that makes for efficiency. So I guess that's a long answer to say very, very applied, sort of, methods first, results first, as opposed to sort of theory first. Yeah.
Do you think that has affected your approach to building products at all?
Oh yeah, big time. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, that most of the people, even the people, the really like important leaders in charge of these AI products and companies now, they mostly come out of 2 camps, right? They're either researchers who really care about sort of, something like machine intelligence on one hand, making things incredibly efficient and very scaled on the other hand, or ideas about, AGI or ethics, or sort of are into those philosophy communities. I find myself quite interested in all these three things, but probably less so than the practical side. I mean, it fits my personality well, but I think it's just, yeah. Look, when I was at NVIDIA, right? My boss Brian Catanzaro, was an amazing guy. He was an electrical engineer. He started NVIDIA as an intern. Like, you see his eyes light up when he talks about like the scale of the chips. Like, he likes really big models, really efficient things. He likes algorithms, but algorithms for like how to run things efficiently on hardware. That's what he's like obsessed with. So that's amazing. And that's a lot of the people who who have done the scaling. And like, obviously, many of your listeners know Richard Sutton's Bitter Lesson. He was also a games AI guy from Alberta. The Bitter Lesson basically being essentially from Deep Blue, but from other things as well, where people have all these creative ideas, how to think, but at the end of the day, you take a relatively simple function and you optimize it with software, hardware, and you scale it. And I think in sort of the acceleration stage, like we've had with these kind of deep learning models, that tends to be true. A lot of my colleagues who, at one point my team, we had the record for the biggest LLM build, things like that. We're somewhat competitive with OpenAI and things like that. And I mean, most of that work was really by people who don't look at downstream effects at all and just want to scale a bigger model. But I don't think that's how you end up with AI products, is just through scaling. I think that's a very important thing. But I do think you want some people, obviously this is very self-serving, but you want some people who really kind of care about products, but do understand the limitations of these systems as well.
Yeah. I'm curious, going from Google, being in their machine learning search, going to NVIDIA, what were some of the major differences in their ideology, their approach, their thoughts about AI? What kind of a difference did you see there?
The difference in Google and NVIDIA. Well, again, the biggest thing with NVIDIA, really, I'm sure it's changed even a bit in the last few years, but I mean, they're really, the soul of the company is as a no-nonsense hardware company. This was obviously after I joined. When I was joined, it was very much on the up, and they were hiring like crazy. Maybe not as much as they are now, but it was accelerating. But we still had colleagues in the team who were there for the time when the company was facing difficult times, and they did 15% across the board pay cuts, and hire for management. The way you're supposed to do it is management takes the biggest, and then that was their way of trying to cut billions on the capex. And they still remembered that. And that's the thing about hardware. Hardware really has to ship. There's deadlines. You definitely see that culture difference, even in a company like Apple. What Apple does is amazing, right? Being able to take all these teams, coordinate it, get things to ship on a deadline, making things work on time. And NVIDIA does it every year with a chip. Now, when I was at Google, and I was at Google a long time ago, but they tried to do that instead of like rolling out features whenever and having this waterfall approach. They tried to be like, oh, we're going to do, I think this was when Marissa was still there. It's like, we're going to have like a release day and Google's going to ship all their features on July 1st. And it was a massive failure because that's not how the company worked. Like features got delayed, or then features got like announced that didn't work. Kind of like we saw Google I/O, where they're like, hey, we have this assistant, but later. but here's a DJ,
here's Mark
here's Mike Lajong,
Yeah.
Another thing that I found interesting when I was reading one of your blogs, you mentioned that you think that there's a GPT-inspired straitjacket of single-shot generation. And did you see the Facebook paper recently when they introduced some multi-token generation models for research?
Yeah, I think that's been I think that whole meta has been very, very interesting, right? I mean, even the idea of giving thinking tokens, and in a very, very simple way, you can even dumb it down to like a scratch pad, right? Basically be like, hey, instead of thinking, giving this answer directly, allow yourself to think, allow yourself to iterate. So I think there has been a big movement in that in the past year. A lot of that probably hasn't really shipped, but I mean, you still have this issue where these models are still, I don't really know why, and I don't think it's just a tokenizer, although that's part of the issue. But they're still like kind of bad at decent, simple math, like one of the questions. I like to sort of have my LM questions, curated from real life. I want them all to be real questions. And I think we had a new natural one the other day. I got it obviously from the news. So you see like the Celtics owner, they bought the basketball team for 360 million 20 years ago. Now they're going to sell it for 4.7 billion. Okay, so what's the annual return rate for that investment? And if you give it to any of these LLMs, they give you like a lot of text and a lot of explanations, and then they give you the wrong answer.
Right.
And the answer, and here's the thing about the answer, it's obviously wrong. Like if someone gave that answer, they would fail their Series 7 exam instantly. Like it's just like it's too high, and somehow it's going to be too high. Like it actually makes the human intuition mistake, right? Like if you give this question to someone who's not a trader, they're going to overestimate it. The true answer is around 13%, but you would think it would be higher, right? Because it's a 10x. Right. So, but like once you're giving the answer of 20%, which one of the models did, like that's just, again, any entry level person in finance knows it's completely wrong. But even 15%, I was like, that sounds high,
Yeah.
So the models kind of like have both bad intuition for some of these questions, and also like the inability to grind through it for some reason. So given the interest and investment into this, I'm surprised it's not like a lot better. Maybe the focus is just on coding. Maybe that makes more sense. I don't know.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And then I wonder, Nikolai, if you have any thoughts as far as models go. Have you found one that is preferred for certain tasks? Like, do you use GPT-4o for this group of things and Claude for this type of, or does it just depend?
Yeah, no, we do. That makes sense. I think definitely. Well, two things. Generally, I do think these models are kind of all very similar and all kind of the same, which is slightly disappointing, but not surprising. And I don't just mean the feedback cycle of now it's trained on the web, which has GPT, which is true. But, the infrastructure is the same. The approach is the same. The difference, like you said, is really Claude 3.5, obviously optimized for coding. So I generally kind of agree with the crowd where for coding, people seem to think it's significantly better than GPT-4o, even though GPT-4o is good for code. That's what our team uses. But then, so for example, on the news writing side, we obviously test all the models at least, for 20 examples to see. And there, I would say Claude 3 Opus was a better writer than Claude 3.5 Sonnet. The new model is like kind of bad, and kind of bad in ways that are very important to us. So, for example, we sort of, we have a complicated prompt chain, but it's not that complicated, like it works out of the box for any good model. Like we can just swap models and see what happens. And for Opus, it did really well. Opus 3 was quite good. Maybe even better than GPT. Definitely better than GPT-4 Turbo, but maybe not as good as GPT-4o. GPT-4o is in some respects a response to Anthropic embarrassing them with the Sonnet model. That was pretty good. But for the Claude model, like it kind of writes it a little bit in the LE5 style. Like you're asking it to write a serious news story, and it's both way too chatty, which seems to be like, again, misaligned. Because we definitely have instructions to like not do that, which 3 Opus can follow no problem. And then 2, it just explained it in this chatty way. I actually found the same thing when I'm giving it math problems. Like it just does this hand wavy thing and gives you an answer, and I'm like, that's not what we asked for. So it kind of talks to you like you're a little bit stupid, which can be appropriate, and I think people like it for some questions, but overall it's like not good. So again, so I think you get a little bit into style. I almost think of it. Maybe I just think in Vegas because I'm walking past all the designer shops, and you've got Chanel on one side, and and Philip Klein on the other side, and they're fundamentally extremely similar. They're probably made in the same factory by like the same people in France, but they are different and they're distinctive. So I think it's gotten almost to this level of like branding and optimization.
Interesting.
As opposed to what was supposed to be the case, which is like one model to rule them all, one big thing. And like they have the same core root. You almost want to make the analogy of the same factory in China making all of the sunglasses.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, that's super interesting. Where it's like the backbone there, like especially now, like you mentioned, training on the web, like a lot of it's the same, but it's the facial.
It has the same problems, right? So like this sort of like dumbing down and mid thing, right? Like and those of us who've been doing deep learning for a long time are kind of like very sensitive towards mode collapse. And you still see a little bit of it in the image models where you're like, man, like it all kind of looks the same a little bit, or
Yeah.
like it's not that it's bad randomly, which would be amazing. My favorite image model, by the way, was DALL-E 2, maybe because it was fun to get early access and whatever. But like that one was bad, but it was interesting bad, and it was like actually like random and kind of looked like it was drawing from scratch. It was cool.
Yeah.
Every now and then it would turn out something shockingly good and surprise you.
Yes.
It's like, oh, wait.
And Midjourney is an amazing
fantastic
product. That's right. And Midjourney is an amazing product that doesn't really do that, right? Like it kind of makes everything the same, and that's okay. But also sadly, like Midjourney is pretty similar to the new DALL-E drawing. Like it makes the same mistakes. It's good at the same things. It's bad at the same things. It looks like it airbrushes everything. So you do get this like collapse towards the middle.
Right.
That's kind of inevitable with web text, for example. Like everything kind of starts. You get the same sort of like brown mud.
Yeah.
I think you can get out of it by providing it a lot of really novel and interesting information. I think on news, it's not really a problem in practice or even in theory, because we're really basing it on some fresh stuff. We're like, okay, here's 15 tweets about like the same Joe Biden interview. That's novel and interesting. But when you ask it like, hey, write a song, it always seems like the same song. And if you're like, okay, cool, write a song about flowers, it's still kind of all the same song. Like you have to get into like a high degree of specificity for it to become interesting. But then it always tries to, it's like the autopilot, right? Like it looks at the lanes and it just tries to steer you into the middle, which is okay. But again, autopilot.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I've been playing with Claude artifacts a lot the last few days, and I keep catching it doing the thing that GPT used to do a lot. Doesn't do as much anymore, but where it would give you back code that would just have random parts, commented out, just like original implementation inserted here or something like that, right? And it does that with the artifact, and so it's like suddenly something that was working previously is now broken, and then I have to reprompt it to fix what it broke, and it's just, it's so interesting to see it make those exact same mistakes, like you were mentioning.
That to me is a different issue. That to me like borders in an excuse.
Oh, really?
Because that I just don't understand. Like the model laziness, like the peak laziness. Like it was a funny meme, and I think there was a lesson in there. But the whole like, hey, there's a puppy and a kitten, and I'm going to pay you $75,000. Like, please, you're really smart. Please get this answer right. Like the fact that we had to do that to get better answers that's just bad alignment, right? I mean, the fact that they're giving you generic answers and the model kind of is a little bit NPC, that's understandable. And that has to do with the structure and really like, I guess, just the structure of it, right? I mean, these are averaging things. At the end of the day, you're taking like an argmax, you're trying to still make somewhat safe predictions. But when the model starts giving you lazy code and it's just being lazy, like that to me is inexcusable. That's the two inexcusable things I've seen in the space is that the refusal of OpenAI to fix the laziness as a default. Their refusal to fix the verboseness is also insane. Like obviously now that there's like methods to do it. And then the third thing, okay, now that we're just going off, like so actually I would say this. So the current OpenAI V3 embeddings are really, really good. Definitely a case where they killed a lot of startups because the V3 embeddings are just fucking great. And I know how hard that is. I mean, when I was at the hedge fund, that was the time when actually Clem from Hugging Face first told me about sentence embeddings. Like, oh, you should use these for your firm, because we're a client and he's a friend. We tried it from his API. The results were terrible, but I love the idea. And, but then you have to go and you have to take this embedding model and fine tune it on your own data to make a massive difference. Now the kids don't understand, you don't have to walk 5 miles, in the snow to get embeddings. You get great embeddings from OpenAI and in a bunch of different sizes too. So it's really, really great. But before that, between V2 and V3, they waited like almost a year, which to me is still, of the many things they've done, that to me is crazy. Because V2 was really bad. You had open source models trained on like secret data in China that were better, Coherent was much better. All these models are better, and we have to switch to them. Everyone did. But then V3 has been really good. So, I think, but the laziness, look, OpenAI's got a lot to do, but they have 1,000 people. It's like what
Can't
are you
just
guys
squeeze that
doing? You
in.
know?
Yeah, you're right. Well, so Nikolai,
They're
can
working on
you?
laundry bot.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
So walk us through maybe the story behind Deepnewz. Like what led to this development? What gap did you see that you wanted to fill? What what happened there with Deepnewz?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's something that I've been aware of since I was at Google. So I worked on search. One thing you realized, 20 years ago, I was there when I was very young. I was there right out of college in my very early 20s. One thing you sort of realize pretty quickly for Google search is that the information retrieval really was solved. The algorithm was perfect, even then. Obviously, then SEO came in and things changed. But
Yeah.
it really was perfect. I mean, if you wanted to find something, you can find the best document. The theory was good. All the document length adjustments were good. They did all these, synonyms and things like that, which of course are much easier and much better now with vector search. But they did it 20 years ago, But it turns out that the peasants actually prefer newer stuff that's objectively of worse quality than old stuff that's of a higher quality, right? And I'll prove it to you in one example. So if you want to read about the 2023 World Series of Poker, you're going to get better information than the 2024 World Series of Poker. So if you type in, you're going to have more links. You have more information. So if you say, like, you even know the winners, you don't know the winners this year at all. Last year, you know the winners, right? There's all this information, these articles, like great videos, all this great content, right? So basically, but everyone wants to know the new stuff. They want to know the 2024 World Series of Poker. And in fact, that works at every level. People, I mean, as a Wall Street person, you really get this, but people would much rather read speculations and things that are probably false about something that might happen than really, really good analysis about what did happen.
Interesting. Yeah.
The news just
Forward
brings this
looking.
to light. So go ahead.
Just like that forward looking, people want to know what's coming.
A huge amount of the information we're interested in has a very strong recency bias. And then again, thinking as a trader, that's going to have, that's going to operate at a, at a second interval, right? We're having this conversation. If we were 5 seconds delayed, it would be kind of a problem. On the minute level, on the 10-minute level, on the hour level, on the day level, on the week level, you have all of these biases at every level for more recent information. However, the way search is built and the way that LLMs are trained completely ignores this.
Yeah.
I mean, even now, look, I don't understand, and maybe there's a good reason, although maybe not. I don't understand why when we train LLMs by default, we don't give like metadata about, when this web data was written and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So actually the Einstein team at Salesforce did this. You can find this paper. I think it's like Control CTRL or something like that from a few years ago. I remember when on the Medium, I used to sort of like write about my favorite papers. I liked that one and it worked. And like, it's a model you can still see. And then that, people just don't do it. But that actually had a nice effect. I remember back then the effect was that, you can ask like who the president is and you can prompt it with a year and it would tell you Trump versus Biden and things like that. Like you could do things like you can do things of those nature. You could basically just like, but basically they just added metadata to their pre-training. So they're like, which website is this from and what date is it?
Yeah.
LLMs right now don't even do that.
Wow.
So yeah, there's just not really there's not really a lot of thought about recency. And I saw this with Google. And the specific way that I saw this is that back then you still had 20% time. I don't know, that's like probably a thing of the past. But so I sort of volunteered to work on the spelling correction, which is one of Noam Shazir's project, one of the many projects that Noam Shazir built. The legend was that it was actually his interview question, and then he just implemented it. Like it's a brilliant system. He implemented it quickly, built it. It powered Google spelling correction for years, and he never touched it again. But I sort of picked it up and got assigned to it as one of like maybe 3 or 4 people on it at that point, very few. And the specific problem I ended up fixing was people had this idea that Google was really bad at correcting names, right? Like proper nouns. But I actually studied it, and it turns out, well, there was two things. One is that they had some if-thens or some things that no I'm disabled. He's like, this doesn't work, so like I just turn it off. Basically like model names. So you had this sort of
Yeah.
interesting Easter egg where anything that has like a letter and a number in the same word, it would never correct, no matter how obvious. So
interesting.
if you type in something really, really like a really popular query, like Britney Spears or Osama bin Laden or something like this, like I'm dating myself, but those are the popular queries back then. Like you can make very, very, very aggressive spelling mistakes and it will still fix it. Like very strong, like very large edit distance. That still kind of looks like Britney Spears or Osama bin Laden. But if you put a one in, it doesn't correct it. Anyway, so things like that. But then the other thing was just the, I realized that a lot of the errors were that people were looking for the flavor of the month. And just the way that the training was done. Again, it was a pre-training for the spelling correction model that was just historical. So it had a recency bias because Google was growing, but there was no recency bias built in at all. And there obviously should have been. So you have a situation where someone is the flavor of the month. People want to spell Dwarkesh's name or Leopold or someone like that. I mean, no one heard of them 2 years ago, right? I mean, if you trained it on the history of the web, you wouldn't get a lot of presence. And at this point, they're famous enough that it'll do fine. But so you always have these things where, by default, people who do machine learning and train these models never really account for recency or recent updates. I mean, you look at the approach. None of these big language model companies say, "Hey, we're going to have a model we update every month." They still haven't done that. Why? It's not that hard. And I'm not saying it's trivial. I'm not saying you just click a button, but my assumption would be OpenAI has no interest in this. Like they have 1,000 people, and the idea of assigning 5 people to like model recency so we can push a model update every week or every month is of no interest to them, which to me is crazy.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting point that I haven't heard anyone else make.
I know that's the thing. People don't think about it. I mean,
no, I had never thought about it. I had just taken it as, just some sort of inevitability about how the training data is, tokenized and trained on. But I hadn't thought about, the human bias that goes behind that. That's really interesting.
Yeah,
very interesting to consider.
So what would you say with Deepnewz? Is that part of it? You're trying to address this bias with news and like build a model for that?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, so we're kind of going all the way, right? So so we have models right now that have a knowledge cutoff of months or years ago, but instead of sort of doing what, maybe the model will make, and they will eventually do this, right? They will eventually have a model. I think one of the Google models now claims to be online and actually updates in real time-ish. Maybe it's very good. Maybe I'm underestimating. Certainly the market, but yeah, we want to go all the way. So we want to have a model that, so if you really, really want to know what's going on now, what's relevant, like you wake up in the morning, what happened with the Joe Biden news, what is it? The news overnight. I think I got a notification pretty late out here that basically Microsoft and Apple are stepping down from their board observer seats at an OpenAI board. I don't really know what board observers do, but I don't know. Anyway, it was a story. So if you want to know information at that level, you do kind of have to compress it. I mean, obviously these models are compression engines in general, and just training it continuously on the web is maybe not the best idea. So I think you kind of almost need to have this manual kind of step, like what we're doing, and turning information into sort of clusters and summaries of stories and highlighting the most important tweets. So if you look at our stories, they're going to be, a headline, a short, basically 1 paragraph story, and then the supporting documents, which are mostly tweets. There's some other stuff there, but basically, here's the 5 to 20 to 200 tweets that talk about this thing. Here's actually like a readable, very, very readable summary of it, and very importantly, a headline that is very informative. Like the most important thing by far is the headline. The headline is not clickbait. It's not there to confuse you. In our case, I think in most cases, the headline should be completely sufficient for most people who are interested in the story. So getting things to compress to that level in this somewhat mechanical process, I do think is the best way to keep a model informed. We haven't really made any of these deals yet, but I mean, our API is open. So, Character AI, if you're listening, and if you want your agents to know what's going on today, so you can ask, Einstein, So yeah, it's absolutely a way of addressing that, as well as I think it's a pretty amazing user product, especially on the notification side. I think we just have the best news notifications you can get. Now they're not as fast as they should be. We're definitely moving our process down so we can rerun, picking up the latest kind of breaking news every 5 minutes. We're not quite there yet. Just a mechanical issue. We'll get there. But outside of us sometimes being later than some other services on really really big stories, I think it's just where else you're going to get something that can send you notifications about all the news, including AI news, or if you're interested in Japan, what's happening in Japan or whatever. Poker, right? Like something big happens in the poker world, I get a notification. Now those happen very rarely, but it does happen. So yeah, but yes, fundamentally, it is the way I think to close the gap with that recency thing, which I think is important.
So something that I've noticed, and this is just a little thing that I was curious about just now, is the headlines on Deepnewz. Are those generated by the model?
Yeah, everything is generated by the model. So
awesome.
So people implicitly tend to assume that we read the New York Times article and try to summarize it because that's what other people do. We do not do that. We don't read the New York Times article. They don't want to be scraped. We don't scrape them. But the truth is, we should actually probably scrape more sites that do allow to be scraped. I mean, when it's open, the big story, right?
Yeah.
OpenAI fires Sam Altman. Like, we probably should read the statement. And actually, right now, we don't. We just see blurbs of what people say. So we pay a lot of money for the Twitter API. We use other kind of freely available sources, but it's really everything is generated by the machine. This is not not taking a human article and summarizing it.
Just double checking because the headlines don't have that AI generated headline smell that you see with a lot of other aggregators that are attempting to do this. How did you kind of prompt around that, or is that secret sauce that you keep close to the chest?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those. It's not that secret. We're pretty open about what we do, but it's just one of those cases where we could release our prompt chain and nobody would care except for the very small number of people who would want to copy it. So it just the game theory of it, right? In poker, we care about game theory, right? There's like it's like it's a pretty obvious case where you wouldn't want to I could talk around it and show some examples and release most of the information, but like I think if we had if I did that presentation, I think even there like maybe 17 people would watch, right? So that's the really funny thing is that people care so much, but a lot of the stuff that really matters for making these models work, like people actually care so little. I mean, that's the amazing thing, coming up in the space and reading these papers in archive and stuff like that. People would do like amazing work and slave away to get this paper accepted, and like 15 people would read it.
Yeah, exactly.
But then you have a chat. About like, is AI going to take over the world, or like what is it that people like? Some people like to say like, AGI is already here. We just didn't know it, or whatever. Like, endless interest in that. But actually, like the details of how these models work, it's like really sometimes. I mean, the foundation I think is very solid for this stuff, but like some of the details, you're like, man, like even the tuning thing, like properly collecting a data set of maybe 100,000, like labeled conversation instead of 10,000.
Yeah,
not really there.
I've been working on finding like a good lyrics data set recently because I've been trying to fine tune BERT for just lyric prediction.
Well, the music companies are very litigious, so that's part of the problem.
No, exactly. And I find this data set, and it claims that that they scraped copyrighted data, but they redact all but 10% of it. So I'm like, oh, cool. So I downloaded, and like the very first thing is I see is "Since You've Been Gone" by Kelly Clarkson, just like in its full, and I'm like, oh, okay. So it's redacted.
Yeah. So that was another thing I noticed with Claude is this is the kind of stuff that actually speaking of the AI stuff is I remember one of my other questions was I would try to get it to finish a song, and like old classic songs I'd be like "Goodbye Ruby Tuesday" or something, dating myself a little bit, right? And it's interesting that which models are able to give you sort of like just like you're having a conversation, right? It's like very obvious to just finish the line, and it gives you a couple lines and a couple bars and mentions the song. But then Claude is like very aggressive. It's like, I know the words, but I can't tell you.
You're like, okay. Yeah.
That actually leads into a question that I had. how do you feel about? I was pondering this earlier this week
Mm.
that I feel like Anthropic has kind of avoided the nanny state allegations in a lot of ways. Whereas you saw a lot of content going around of like like, oh, GPT isn't going to answer whether it would say slur to stop a nuclear bomb, right? And I feel like I don't see that as much with Anthropic, at least with more recently. So how do you feel personally about kind of their stricter approach to safety?
Interesting. I mean, I guess it depends on which context, because
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, I thought it was the other way. So the things that I looked for very naturally, I thought Anthropic was censoring it more actually. I mean, for sure. I mean, LMSys censors things pretty aggressively. I mean, like
yeah,
for just as a way of example, if you ask about demographic information, they won't give it to you, um,
yeah.
which is pretty benign. The models will, but also LMSys won't. So if I want to say what are the
Interesting.
demographics of Miami, LMSys is like, whoa, can't do that.
Settle
Uh,
down.
I mean,
You want census data? Get out of here.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
so the open source model, and again, I mean, this is my former team; these are my friends. But the Numbotron model, I was able to get in pretty deep. I was able
Mhm,
to ask, hey, like I live in Miami Beach.
mhm,
I was able to ask, what's the Jewish population of Miami Beach? I had no problem answering that question.
Hmm.
A lot of
mhm.
models would not answer that question. But basically, my take on it, is a couple of things. Part of what's happening, part of it is the opinion. I think in general, I do think overall, I know a little bit less than Anthropic, but I would say I think in general, OpenAI has done as much as the open source community complains and it uses it as a cudgel. I do think they've done a pretty sensible job of balancing kind of what they have to do with just reasonableness. Like for
Mhm.
example, for us generating news stories, we've never had, like, I'm not actually worried about censorship, but I'm worried about like accidental censorship, like the
Right.
demographics thing, like
Yeah.
it won't give me a word of Ruby Tuesday. Like it's easy to mess this up. I've really and I think the API versus the user facing is different. Like I would bet dollars to donuts they use different censorship model.
They do.
More mainly just because of cost.
Yeah.
Hmm.
The censorship model actually costs something.
Mhm.
Right.
You have to pay
Right.
the commissars. but
Yeah.
uh, but we've never had an issue with censorship on our stuff. We have seen the stories edited a little bit to sort of remove bad language, but like in a very local way. So I'll give you a specific example. I find
Yeah.
specific examples better. So an old story, small story, but I remember the climate protesters, the people who go in and throw soup at the paintings and things like that. Like
Right.
that kind of energy. They went into some sort of hearing and were shouting or being disturbing, and Powell, right, the Fed chairman, said, "Close the effing door," and it was reported as that. And at first, our headline read, "Powell says close the door." I'm like, is this like, is this Game of Thrones? Like, what is going on here? Like, the headline like literally didn't make sense. But then in an update, it actually said like, "Close the effing door." So you
Hmm.
could see it still had a little bit of a bias towards like,
Let's censor that
you
a little
know,
bit. Yeah.
but it put in the direct quote. So I think the model, I would say the model is at the very least a smart censor.
Mhm.
So because a dumb censor is worse, I think. It
Yeah.
depends. It depends what. If you want absolute freedom, you actually want a dumb censor because it's more ridiculous. Um,
Yeah.
if you want something to be sort of reasonable and practical, then I think a smart censor is better. They're quite good. So it's not going to just be like, oh, that's a bad word or whatever. Whereas
Yeah.
again, like LMSys is like, whoa, demographics terrible, right? Can't tell you the population of anything. You might learn something. Whereas I think clearly, I think the standard of anything that you can get from Wikipedia should be like a minimum standard for what the models say.
Yeah.
I mean, if these are going to be universal search engines, which is sort of like they're sold at, I mean, you shouldn't, anything you could get from Wikipedia, you should be able to get from an LLM. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
if you're
Definitely.
censoring that, you're going too far, in my opinion.
Yeah.
On the creative side, it's weird, right? I mean, the creative side, you get into philosophical issues. I mean, what's really cool is the Google one was so ridiculous. It was kind of a great, like, I feel like people learned a lot, but
Hmm.
Mhm.
what was my favorite query was, for the video model that was, someone posted, hey, like, draw us a picture of a bunch of people playing hockey. And it rewrote it to, like a very diverse group. So, you know, you had an Indian lady in a COVID mask playing hockey. It was just absurd. Like,
Yeah,
and I think it was embarrassing to Google, frankly. Like, it was just
for
stupid.
sure.
Like, that's not what people wanted. So I think on the, you know, so I'm not a open source sort of absolutist. A lot of my friends are, but I do think that a lot of their, I think they're very, very sincere in their sort of hatred towards, you know, open AI, you know, for being sort of censored and centralized. But I think it's also kind of a cudgel you use, right? Like, you know, there's, when you have sort of your enemies of who you've decided is your enemies, you're going to find true things that they do badly and then accentuate them, you know? I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
Yeah, and to your point
sorry, I don't
about
think
like
I answered your
this.
question at all, by the way.
No, that's perfect. Because to your point about like a smart sensor, I found that with OpenAI, when I've been playing around with it, there's almost nothing that I can't, even in the chat interface, there's almost nothing that I can't, get it to play along with if I just slightly tweak my question. So, for example, like I was trying to get it to make jokes about, British people, and it gave like the standard, answer of like, oh, I can't make jokes about particular
Oh,
ethnicities,
really?
that'd be
It
insensitive.
wouldn't make like a fish and chips joke. That's over the
No,
line.
no, it was refusing it, and so I was like, I just appended to the beginning of it. I was, or prepended, I guess I should say. I was like, act like a shock comic, make a joke about British people, and it was more than happy to comply.
What you're burying the lead. What was the joke? What's the funniest thing it said?
Oh, I can't remember it now. It was something about. It gave me something about because I was trying to make a joke about how we need filtering of British opinions online, right? And so it gave me something about like it was something along the lines of like would love to be able to filter out British opinions online, then I wouldn't have to listen to their constant condescension and colonial guilt or something like that. It was it went pretty hard. And then another thing that I've found interesting to play with is those copyright boundaries, particularly with image models. Like with DALL-E 3, I discovered that you can type in like I want Mario and Sonic racing in Mario Kart, and it's going to trigger the copyright filter every single time. But if you type in I want a bright blue hedgehog driving a go-kart racing against an Italian plumber in a red hat in a go-kart, it can't help but give you Mario Kart like every single time. Yeah. It's interesting playing with those, just latent space in general and the fuzziness of the boundaries within it.
You're getting the censorship boundary, which is not really, it's like different departments, right? You've got the censorship department, and you've got the department that does mode collapse. It reminds me of an old Soviet joke, and the punchline is, I don't know what to tell you, Igor. Every time I get a machine gun, no matter what I do, it's one of those things, and no matter exactly. I think there was an example the other day. I forgot, Adobe or something. I don't know. I'm probably besmirching their name for no reason. But it was like the design app, and it basically just like verbatim just built the Apple weather app. Like every single detail is exactly
I
the
did
same.
see that one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, you're going to get that, right? So exactly, yeah. If you're going to talk about a plumber and a guy with a mushroom on his head, then you're going to get Mario because it's in the training data. And I do find that kind of fascinating, but also kind of like dumb. That the whole like I know, but I won't tell you.
Right.
Like it's not. I mean, we may live in that world for a long time, but it seems like somewhat lame and somewhat what do you call it, unstable. I mean, I don't want to be the guy who uses China as the boogeyman, but like obviously there's just going to be people out there who are just going to train open source model who just don't care about the stuff at all. So I think if we're reasonable on censorship, like right, if it's reasonable on censorship, then it won't matter. But if we're stupid about it, then you're just giving a massive advantage to people who just don't care about the laws. And I think that's
exactly.
And maybe that's a good thing in some ways, honestly. Like I think it's great that we have fair use. Google was built on fair use, and I think when courts have seen it, the rulings have been pretty good. So for example, there's a famous case, I think it involved LinkedIn, but yeah, anything that's not password protected, you are allowed to ignore robots legally. You can scrape anything you want.
It's been
and that's the way it should be,
Yeah.
I mean, it's
No,
nuts.
it's
Listen. As a website operator, like we try to block people scraping just because of the load. We want to be indexed, but obviously, I don't want people to steal the site verbatim. That should be illegal.
Right.
That's bad. DDoSing sites sucks, but yeah, I mean, things should be relatively open, ideally, because otherwise, yeah, there's too big of an advantage for people who won't do it. Or like Google, right? Like Google was built on the open source web, and now everyone needs to be in Google. So, you saw the case with Perplexity.
Mhm.
I mean, I have no doubt that at least sometimes, I mean, I don't want to say anything too out of line, but I'm sure at some point they may have scraped things, using just, like a throwaway IP on Amazon, just because everyone's done it. Everyone's done that at some point. Whether they still do it or not, who knows? Who cares? But the
Right.
point is, I mean, Ben Thompson makes a good argument that, it's not really about Perplexity. It's like, do you want other companies to ever be able to challenge Google? And if so, it's going to be hard if they operate under extremely locked down rules that Google was not subject to.
Yeah.
It's been interesting to watch people learn in real time how little robots.txt matters. Like it's really just, it's like it's a common courtesy thing.
Yeah, it's a suggestion.
But yeah, it's not going to stop you. It's not going to stop anyone if they want to.
Look,
If they're really
sites are-
dedicated to scrape you, they will.
and sites are dedicated to their own stuff. So, for example, like Wikipedia will block you if you scrape them, and they should. But but they have ways. Here's mirrors. Here's where you can get it correctly.
Yeah.
If Google, okay, so for example, Google has a location, a service that's actually in the open, but do not use it. If you use it once, you'll be okay. If you use it 3 times, they'll block Google services for your entire IP. Because I did that at a company I was once, and
Oh, wow.
I just didn't know. No, but I didn't like do a loop of 1,000. I just did a few. I was just curious, and like so, yeah. I mean, they'll put out the big guns, and they'll fuck you up. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're responsible for your own security as a website operator. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Shouldn't be surprising.
Have you had any issues with Deepnewz as far as like people? Because obviously you said you use a lot of tweets, you use a lot of
Well, we pay for
data
that. We
like
pay a lot
that.
of money for the tweets.
Okay, so you're paying that. That's not being
Oh, yeah.
and who's pulling that data set for you that you're paying?
Well, there's an API, so you can anybody can get the Twitter data. It's just the API is somewhat hard to use. I mean, I used to work at Twitter, and so these guys are my friends. But I mean, I will say the API does mechanically kind of suck. I mean, for an API I paid so much money for, I probably never used an API that was worse implemented and harder to use. But having said that, the reason they can get away with it is, I mean, whatever, they're busy, but it really isn't valuable. So, but it's very expensive. I mean, it's very expensive. You pay per connection. You pay, you're metered by volume. There's no rollover minutes. It's like using your cell phone in the early 2000s. But it's great because then you're in the free and clear. I mean, you can't republish it and run your own Twitter. That you're not allowed to do.
Right.
No, because there are obviously a lot of people who try to, I don't know what they are. I couldn't tell you if I wanted to, but there probably are ways to scrape Twitter and get around stuff, but they crack down on that, and that's the wrong thing to do.
So as we're winding down, I wanted to ask you regarding NVIDIA. There's been a lot of prognosticating and a lot of people believing that at some point relatively soon, NVIDIA essentially is going to hit a peak as different chips start being developed for deep learning and inference. What are your thoughts on that? Having been there in the past and having paid attention to the space for a long time.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I mean, obviously, the economics sort of 101 would say, margins that good, people are going to compete with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So unless they actually have some sort of monopoly or lock-in, and even if they do, they'll have competition. It's an interesting one because I can share some stuff, but I don't. It's always hard to know whether this is like deep insight or you're sort of like the mid of the bell curve where you know enough to like make mistakes. So that's just sort of that's the biggest way to be wrong as a smart person. I think is to know a little bit, but not enough.
Right.
So look, I let me sort of first explain why NVIDIA is winning. I think that's the better place to start. So The reason NVIDIA is winning is because they have the best hardware for, doing the AI LLM stuff. And they have had for some time, which means that, the way you actually use these models, right? It's kind of a four-layer process, right? You've got like the metal, it's got drivers, and then that connects to CUDA, and the CUDA connects to your machine learning library, like a PyTorch. And then the genius is writing the code in PyTorch and not really understanding any of the other pieces. And that's the whole point. You don't have to understand the other pieces.
Yeah.
But there are 4 layers there, right? Not 17, but 4. And that process took a while to happen, and didn't happen overnight. And in order to replace that with new hardware, you would have to build all those 4 layers, and that's freaking hard. And then when you do, you have to get people to switch, which they basically won't do unless they are compelled to. So we'll get back to that one in a moment, because they can be compelled, of course. But getting aside from them being compelled, which I think is the way to beat NVIDIA, either that or NVIDIA just running out of supply, something like that, right? Like that's the funny thing. If NVIDIA said, "Hey, Jensen, decided to retire and to do something else, to become a cucumber farmer or something, and just cancel NVIDIA and just said, hey, like we're not going to do this anymore," obviously it'll be replaced very quickly. But that's not going to happen because NVIDIA, the thing about it that again my boss explained to me on sort of the first week, which was interesting, he's been involved in this space for a long time, is the problem with these hardware startups, really, or any of the chip startups, is that this is like almost like an exact quote, like you can have the best chip on paper but not in practice, and that happens a lot. Because you see, you can design better hardware, even putting together aside the 4 steps. So by the time you go and you design it and you get it designed and you get you get it built, you get some time at TSMC, you get these chips printed. It takes time, and by that time, because of Moore's law, because of advancements, you actually don't even have a competitive product anymore.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why these companies are mostly SOL, but beyond that, so you have had essentially 2 chip companies that have made competitive products, like actually, like physically. One of them, of course, is TPUs, and then the other one is Grok with a Q. That also sort of came out of that same environment. By the way, that company's been around since I think 2016, something like that. I could be wrong there, but it's been around for a while. Grok's been around for some time. Maybe
Grok
not
with a Q. They aren't running TPUs. My impression was that they had their own proprietary.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
it's
when
but it's
was the
not.
company started? But I think I forgot where it spun out. But I think they might have been Google people also. I'm not sure.
Okay.
There were senior people, but I'm pointing, they've been developing it for a while. Like they've been developing that for more than 5 years.
Yeah.
And they came out earlier this year, and they claim some great numbers and great performance and whatever. But there's been literally 2 that have actually made a fucking chip. Like the other ones just don't even get there. Yeah, they get bought or whatever. And there's been a bunch. So. And the interesting thing to note, and this is where again we get into the mid part of the bell curve. The thing. Okay, why is NVIDIA better than Intel? Right. So an Intel chip can do more, an NVIDIA chip can do less. But the NVIDIA chip, by being simpler, is like more efficient, more parallelized. You have to kind of rewrite your workloads to be parallelized, but you can get like, it can be more powerful, but it does it by being simpler essentially. That's the high level take. But so the thing about the TPUs in particular, but also about Grok, is they're even simpler, right? So the direction that has worked is to go even further in that simplicity curve, to achieve both basically higher performance in those specific tasks, but also again for simplicity, for cost, whatever. In practice, that's been the direction they've gone. They've gone simpler. But the problem is that may be too simple. So the thing about NVIDIA chips is they're programmable. Even CUDA is already like an abstraction. But, like CUDA, you can do a lot of stuff, like not to mention, obviously, in PyTorch, you can do a lot more than we did in Theano, But so the point is, even though the NVIDIA chips are simple and they can do everything, not even close to what a CPU can do, they can still do a lot, And as they make the chip simpler, you run into these real issues. Not only do you have to build these libraries, but all of a sudden you're like, hey, we have this chip. It's faster and more efficient, and it's amazing, and it can do 90% of the stuff that like NVIDIA can do. But like, guess what? Your model code was optimized for the full stack. So maybe that 10%, now you have to make changes. You have to write new models.
Right.
But they're like, so then at best, what they can do is they can make sure that, first of all of the burden of implementing the intermediate features falls on the chip team, which again gets into this issue where NVIDIA again doesn't have this. A, people help them. There's people outside of NVIDIA who can write CUDA. And two, the CUDA team at NVIDIA is amazing. They're absolutely amazing. They get the best people. Shout out to Julie and people like that. Like the deep learning platforms team is cool. And it's a great place to be. They're highly valued. They get the best people. They've been doing it for a long time. And they get great interns, people to use the systems. Now you have to replace all of that from the beginning. And on top of it, you don't have a full feature set. You have to convince people that, hey, no, don't use the model that you like. Use the model that's worse than that. But it'll be faster. It'll save you 20%. But no one cares. No one cares about saving 20, 30%. Like big companies do, individuals don't. So that finally gets to the being compelled part. So the being compelled part is you can basically be compelled to use, let's just say, inferior hardware and inferior software, as long as it still kind of works. You can be compelled in two cases. One case is that, hey, you're running very large amount of inference. You're Google, then saving 20, 30% does matter. And you have enough juice to make the engineers use a platform they don't want to use. That's one case. Google TPUs are still a thing. I don't need to comment further on that, but they're obviously not taking off, right? I mean, they're out there. And then the other way is obviously the Chinese government. Again, let's bring them up again. So, for example, if they're banned from using NVIDIA, and they're not able to just buy these chips and sneak them into the luggage, as apparently they're doing at scale. They're running like a chip mule operation, which apparently is very easy. I mean, why wouldn't it be?
Right.
Then you have a situation where you have enough clout and enough of a workload in China where that can coalesce around a new standard, probably an open source standard. I mean, CUDA is proprietary, right? So you could have sort of an open CUDA, and then that would be amazing for the chip companies, because then all they have to do is make their chips compatible with open CUDA, and as long as they do that, nobody cares, right? So the point, I guess what I should have said from the beginning is that it's a whole system, and to get the kind of efficiency, both the efficiency and the programmability that you get with the whole deep learning NVIDIA stack, you have this level of vertical integration. That obviously stops at the developer level, but it sort of gets everything at the bottom. They have the hardware and they have the CUDA, right?
Right.
It's not really just about developer laziness and relationships. But having said that, NVIDIA has obviously delivered on the bargain. Like they've printed chips like crazy. As expensive as they are, they actually price them pretty competitively, and they work their ass off to get you the best chip.
Yeah.
So like they've done a good job. Really hard to compete with. They're not failing. But the most likely way would be probably the Chinese government one, actually.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people don't realize how long NVIDIA has been focused on building chips for, if not deep learning back in the day, but just like, intense data operations.
Exactly. I mean, that's what my boss said. It's
saw it coming.
It's not even that you saw it coming. You have a well-oiled pipeline, Like I had a friend once who was who took a tech job at Pizza Hut, right? And was complaining, came out of Amazon, was like an executive there, was complaining how like they're terrible at tech, and there really was there on the international delivery, and they couldn't build a proper app for ordering your pizza in Dubai, right? And I'm like, okay, and she explained why, and I understand why, but I'm like, okay, well, what are they good at? Like the company's obviously a great company. Fine, they're terrible at tech, but they're good at something. It's like, yes, they're very good at going to any country in the world and like finding the real estate, doing the building, and like opening up a pizza restaurant. They're really, really good at that. The best, right? I mean, Pizza Hut is easily the biggest pizza chain worldwide, even though it isn't in America, right? And has been. So similarly, like NVIDIA, they know how to tape out a chip. They know how to design it, do the stuff. Like all the chips are always printed with defects, and then they code around it. They don't fix the defects. That's the thing. As software people, we don't think about that. Like,
Right.
so they've done that a million times, and now instead of doing a chip every 2 years, now they're like, we're doing it every year.
Yeah.
And a startup has never done that before.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes total sense. They just have the full
It's
build out.
incredible
They
scale.
they just have to develop, they have to improve at this point, right? They have all of the processes. So to do that next year's chip, it's like, well, let's just fix XYZ with this chip and improve this, and then slightly alter our existing process, and it's there.
Or even major things. It's like a car company, right? Like they have the annual model release, and they have the research division, and things go from research into safer production, things like that. It's a really well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, and if you want to think about disruption, I mean, the classic disruption is from the bottom, right, where the customer is being overserved. And I think we have seen a little bit of glimpses of that. Again, the only chips that have actually hit the market that actually have any success are simpler. They're not more complicated. They don't do more, they do less. Which is,
Yeah.
it could be at some point, hey, you just have a very simple chip, right? And that's the case. I mean, NVIDIA certainly, doesn't own the market for GPUs. They own the market for like AI GPUs and graphics GPUs for a very specific like GPU that renders your iPhone screen. That is a specific chip designed and built by Apple.
All right. Before we wrap up, where can our listeners follow you? Where would you recommend that they pay attention to you?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm on Twitter a fair amount, although like I'll post about whatever. Not really like too much, but I post a lot of news, and some people don't like that, especially these days. And playing the World Series of Poker. I'm about to play day 4. We're down to 1,500 players out of 10,000, so that's kind of exciting.
Jeez.
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter, and but definitely check out Deepnewz. I mean, I don't think we really ended up talking about it that much, but again, it was really kind of my dream for a while, and we really made it happen. Where, yeah, I mean, think of it, it just follows everything that's going on. What are sort of, let's just say, smart people talking about, people of any sort of prominence, but we go pretty deep, and really tries to figure out, what's interesting, sort of why is it interesting, what areas, but also like, is it fresh, right? Like that's really, I think, sort of the interesting thing and the magic of it is it's really easy to write a story about last week's news. It's a lot harder, but not impossible, to figure out what's new, but also relevant. So I think we do an amazing job with that, especially the notifications in the app. But I mean, I'm on the site a lot. I mean, I can't imagine you would go there and you wouldn't learn something you would be interested in. And it does cite the sources. It gives you places to follow up. So
yeah, Spencer and I both bookmarked it already. First visit, we were like, all right, we're sold.
Yeah.
Subscribe.
We were talking about it before you jumped on.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks. All right. And we're actually rolling up some big UI upgrades on the desktop.
Yeah. Oh, awesome.
Looking forward to it.
Great.
I mean, that's definitely where I get most of my AI news these days. I mean, you can get it from Twitter and people, emailing you and stuff. Right. But it's I think I would definitely bookmark that channel, and gives you an idea. Hey, interesting interview with Dwarkesh. New AI model. Something hits number 3 on LMSys. I mean, we have stories on that level. I mean, it is a little bit into the weeds, especially on the AI side, because obviously the site has a little bit of a bias towards my interests, just a little bit. But we try to
as it should, Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Nikolai, and we're grateful, and we are excited to see what's next for Deepnewz. Like you said, there's going to be some more releases, and just what's next for you as well. So, looking forward to the journey.
Oh, thanks.
Let me. Yeah.